some questions about really anything in the industry. So a little bit about myself. First of all, I wanted to thank you for saying that, Anna Maria. I'm very excited to be here too. Hi, Pam. I wanted to start by saying I've never really hosted anything on my own, so this is totally new to me and I'm just feeling my way around this. I'm here so you can ask me questions and feel free to ask anything you want, but I'll start with a little bit of my background. So I have been a teacher. This would be my 18th year of teaching, and I've taught everything from kindergarten to grade 8 and every single subject in school, from like science to art to music. I don't even know how I got through that. But I've been a teacher for a really long time, and about 5 years ago, Josh and I, my husband and I, designed a game together, and we were going to pitch it to some publishers, and you know, I thought to myself, maybe it would be a really good idea for me to publish it and to jump into this world I knew nothing about. But I had always wanted to run my own business, and I felt like that would be a really good start to trying to do something like that. So we took Foodfighters to Kickstarter, and it was a mild success. We funded on the last day. That was really, really exciting. It was a difficult month, excruciating actually. And for some reason, I felt like I wanted to do it again. I don't know why. Anyway, so we went and made a second game, and after that game hit, we decided to publish another one of our games, and right after that happened, we found out that our favorite game, Endeavor Age of Sail, or Age, sorry, it was Endeavor back then, was not going to be published by Zeman anymore, which it had been for the past 10 years. And Josh had done the art on the original one, and I said to Josh, like, I'm a publisher now. Maybe we should see if we can get this game, which is our favorite game. And that sort of changed the whole trajectory of my life. I was still teaching when we went through the Kickstarter campaign, but by the end of it, it was clear to me that there was no way I could be doing the publishing gig and also teaching at the same time and doing either of the jobs justice. So I decided to take a leap, and last year was my first year at doing this publishing gig full-time, and it obviously went well. I'm now on my second school year of not being there, and we are 9 games in, which is so crazy in a short 5 years. And I'm really, as far as careers go, I'm really having the time of my life. Like I said, I always wanted to own my own business. I felt like I had some business sense, and it was working for me. But also, I get to set my own hours and do things that I want to do. And I also get to spend mostly every day with one of my favorite people in the world, which is Josh, who's my husband. So it's going really well, and I'm happy to be here today. And I don't know what else to say. I think that was kind of a lot. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. I see that Barbara's here. Hello. I think I said hello to you already, and Rachel. Yes, I am living the dream, Barbara. It really it's a dream come true. first and foremost, I have to say that it's nice to be able to go to the bathroom whenever I need to go to the bathroom. I say that because as a teacher, it's very, very difficult to find yourself getting out of the classroom. So yes, that is a dream come true. Nicole has said that a question that was submitted in advance, I designed a family-friendly strategy game and have pitched many times, specifically to those who publish games for a younger audience. However, the feedback we consistently get from publishers, which is not consistent from the feedback we've received from playtesters, is that families don't want to take that games, no matter how mild the element, with most publishers' favorite cooperative play. Do you find this trend to be true? Well, our best playtesters are our children, and in the games that we have played that have some take that, we find that our kids can't take it very well. We have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and when the 10-year-old was about 6 and we played a take that game, it was very, very difficult for him to take that to the point of tears. And I kind of said, like, it might not be the right the right audience for take that. Now, both of our kids have grown up a little bit and they can take it a little more. We play games that have some element of it, but it's not based on that take that element. So I would suggest not necessarily going into cooperative play, because playing against one another is a good thing to do in your family, and also teaches kids how to lose and that sort of thing. But I do find that the take that is a very difficult thing to have in most family games. Pam says, congrats on taking the plunge. Thank you. And thank you for saying you're happy to see me succeed. You're really sweet. What is one tip I have for a designer who is looking to design games full time? Is it realistic or is it possible? My suggestion is that if you want to be in this industry full time, that designing games alone is probably not going to do it for you. I know a lot of people who are game designers who've been trying really hard to, like successful game designers who've been trying really hard to make that a full-time gig. And unless you're cranking out like 20 games a year and some of them are huge successes, it's really difficult to do that. I think the idea would be to try to find another job maybe within the industry that will allow you to design games as well. Like maybe you want to work in-house as marketing, and then, you know, that company would have you the first right of refusal for your games. But I think that it's everyone's dream. And it's a nice dream to have, but I think in this day and age when there are so many games and they're really fighting against each other for shelf space, I think that your best bet would, if you want to be in the industry, is to try to find a job doing something else where you can design full-time as well. Hi, Lizzie. Nice to see you. Yeah, you just need a Jenga, Pam. That's true. You just need a Jenga. We all need a Jenga. All right. Nicole says, my 11-year-old daughter wants to design a game. Do your kids design games? Any advice on how to encourage her? Actually, that's a really great question, and I encourage kids to be designing games all the time. When I was in the classroom, I ran 2 programs. One was outside of the classroom where kids would come and to a board game club, and we played different games every week or twice a week. But also within the classroom, which is part of my program, I had students design games. The first half of the year was all based in learning different mechanisms and how they fit into games and what kids enjoyed about games and what they didn't enjoy about games. And, you know, often, just going back to that question from before about take that, often kids would say, I don't like when I don't feel good in a game, and that's one of the things that they would talk about. My younger son actually has decided that he wants to be his dad, and he wants to be a game designer and a game artist like his dad is. And so he talks about designing all the time. Whenever we're sitting down and playing prototypes with him, he's always suggesting ways to make it better, things that would be more fun for him. But in terms of encouraging, I would really just sit down and play games with your daughter, Nicole, and ask what she likes about the game, what makes it fun, what makes it engaging. Sometimes you'll hear the art, sometimes you'll hear, I liked that I won, you know, things that don't necessarily have to do with mechanisms. And when you think that you've had enough experience, maybe you and your daughter, at looking and talking about games, talking about how you might design a game. And obviously there are two ways you can go about that. You can start with a mechanism that maybe you have come up with together, or maybe that she's come up with on her own, or you can start from having some sort of idea about what you want the theme to be. And often when I sit down to design a game, I'm always thinking about theme first. I can't think about mechanisms until I think about a theme. And Josh, my husband, does exactly the opposite to that. He comes up with an interesting mechanism and thinks about how that would relate to a theme. What is the biggest unexpected hurdle in starting or running a board game publishing company? You know, it's really interesting because I think that I started with one foot forward. Josh had been in the industry for about 10 years before I decided I wanted to publish games. And I knew a lot of people in the industry already, so I think that I started off in a very good place. One of the hardest things I find is balancing giving things away and being good to people who support us. I really struggle with, you know, just wanting everybody to be happy with everything. And so I really will try to do whatever I can to make that happen. Sometimes that ends up losing me money, but I know in the long run I will have somebody who is happy playing our games forever. It's really important to have a good name in the industry, especially when you're really small, and keeping that name untarnished is hard. And that's where I say I struggle with it a little bit, because I try as hard as I can to do anything I possibly can to make our backers happy, from Kickstarter, to make somebody who bought a game in retail that, you know, maybe they have a component that broke, just like getting it out to them as soon as I possibly can, because I think it's really important that we have that good reputation. Pam asks, do I look for specific elements in a game to want to publish it? And how do they differ between your two publishing companies? Yes, I look more specifically for games for our family games company, which is called KTBG, or Kids Table Board Gaming, which I forgot to mention before, I'm sorry. The type of game we're looking for KTBG is a game that can be scalable, so that we design the game or develop the game for adults to play so that kids can play with them. And one of the things we try to do is make them modular so that we can take an element out or put an element in so that it is more accessible to newer gamers or younger gamers. And then it's a little bit deeper for gamers that are older or more experienced. So that's a huge thing for us. We won't really publish a game that doesn't have that sort of element. If it doesn't have something that's modular that can be taken out of it, we try to make it so that you can play it at its very basic form with somebody who is a little bit more experienced and might be playing with strategy, and everybody still is very engaged in the gameplay. For our other brand, Burnt Island Games, we are making games that are mid-weight, and I'm not going to say Euro, but the first two games that we published from that brand are Euro. We're looking for games that have something different, that have table presence, that have an element of some sort of mechanism that you feel is familiar, but at the same time is hefty, is weighty, makes you think about what you have to do when you're playing the game. So the two companies differ greatly, you know, it helps us because this now allows us to look for a broad range of games, and then for people who want to buy our games, you know exactly where to go if they're buying a game for their family or they're buying a game for themselves and their playing group. Molly says, I've been a full-time designer and publisher since just before launching my company's first product. Cool. Wing It, about 2.5 years ago. In that time, I have never met a full-time female publisher designer with kids, despite 2 years at the Gamma trade show and attending at large shows like Origins, Gen Con, PAX East, PAX West, and UK Games Expo. Well, that's pretty cool. I totally want to see what you've got going now. That's amazing. I just love this, and I'm fully immersed in it, and it's 24 hours a day. I eat, sleep, and dream about my company and doing shows and the next Kickstarter, and you know what the next thing in board gaming is going to be. I just love it so much, and because I have a partner, my husband, who's also in it, and my kids love to play games, everything just comes so naturally for us. Hi, Roberta. Nice to see you. Roberta's here, and Roberta actually happens to be the designer of our next KTBG game that is coming in spring to Kickstarter, which I can't really talk about so much right now because there's lots going on. Nicole says, what advice can you give to a new publishing company in finding or contracting with a distributor? Ooh, the distributor question, that's always a difficult one. You know, I think the best thing to do when you are publishing a game is have discussions with other publishers who have connections to distribution companies. I started with Foodfighters, as I mentioned before, and when we only had Foodfighters, there were several distributors who were not sure that they wanted to jump on board with a small publisher with one game because they weren't sure where we were going to take it. And a lot of distributors want to offer a whole range of games to the people who buy games from them. So the bigger distributors weren't really interested in talking to me so much. Well, they talked to me, but they weren't really interested in distributing Foodfighters at the time. So I had to look for a company, and for the life of me, I can't remember what it's called right now. Hit Point Sales. So Hit Point Sales is a division of another company that does fulfillment, and they were willing to take on my one game at that point, and basically what they were doing with it was they were just having it in their warehouse I didn't have to pay for it sitting there, but they were happy to distribute it for me for people who, or companies that wanted to buy my games. And that was really nice for me because they sold a bunch of games, and you know, the life of it, the lifespan of it was short because they had, you know, only so much reach. But because I had that one game behind me and I had another one coming out, we started moving into another distributor who became interested in our games, and we were with them for a really long time. They were great also, but you know, they wanted to see that I had some sales behind me before they could take anything. And then from there we grew even more, and we needed a company that could distribute more of our games to a wider base. So essentially, you're starting grassroots and you want to have your distribution sort of grassroots as well, and the best thing to do is just talk to other publishers, see if you can get in touch with some, and you know, don't feel bad if a company says to you, you know, you don't have enough for us right now. They like to have a full page distribution list of your games. You try to find a company that wants to and is willing to take your games, and you grow from there. And you shouldn't feel bad about it. You should feel proud, because it's really amazing, first of all, to get to a point where you would be talking to a distributor about taking your games. I think that's a really huge success. Pam says that she can't wait for Roberta KTBG collab. We're very excited about it, and it's a really good game, Pam. Okay, Pam says, tell us about your recent very successful campaign, Fossilis. So we just, on Thursday, finished a Kickstarter campaign for a game called Fossilis. It has a 3D board, and essentially what you're doing is you're digging for dino bones, and you're competing with other paleontologists to bring back the best and the most bones to your museum and gain the most points and cred basically by the end of the game. And, you know, when we found this game, we actually found it at Pam's also very successful Proto-TO here in Toronto last year, last September. And we saw the game sitting out on the table, and the designer who we knew, we had spoken to him several times, his name's David Diaz, had this grid, this 3D grid with holes in it. It was a 6x6 grid, and there were tiles on top of it, and I thought to myself, well, wow, that looks really cool, something different. So I asked him about it, and he told me it was dinos, and for years I've been wanting to make a dino game, and so I sat down and I played it, and like right after I played it, I was like, I need to get my kids here. I have to have them play this game. I have to see if they'll at least like it. If they like it, it would be something we'd want to take home. And so they came the next day, and they sat through an entire session from beginning to end. It took over an hour, and they were engaged the entire time. And so that told me right away we have a winner. And so it was maybe like the next week or week after that that we signed the game, which was really exciting for everybody, but especially because we found it at Proto-TO. And Proto-TO's in Toronto, and we're from Toronto, and this is a Toronto designer. So it was all very, very exciting for us. And it took just over a year to do development and get it to Kickstarter. And you know, off the top of my head, I'm just going to look for it here, but off of the top of my head, okay, so we had 4,626 backers, which, I mean, for a family weight game on Kickstarter is a massive success in my eyes, and we're so incredibly happy with the campaign. My entire team did an amazing job. So David did the best job at designing this game, but then we had some amazing development. Sean Jackman and Josh and I spent weeks and weeks and weeks developing it. And then we had Game Trays do the design of the actual 3D board. And John Meitling do the amazing video, and Apolline Etienne doing the art, which completely brought it to life. And then Mesa Game Labs, who did all of the GIFs on the page, which are also really amazing. So it was a really huge team, and I feel so happy and proud for them that they got to experience this. And by the way, David is a first-time designer, so having this experience for him has been really, really amazing. Okay, and thanks for bringing that up, Pam, and your excitement for it, Nicole. We're really proud of this game, and I'm so happy that it turned out the way it did so far. Nicole asks, do I sell through Amazon? Why or why not? My company does not sell through Amazon. I used to, but because I am represented by Publisher Services Inc., they have their own Amazon pages, and Amazon sells my games. So I used to use Amazon. I didn't think it was a fantastic way to sell my games. I mean, I made good money for each sale I made, but it didn't go that well. But since PSI and Amazon have been selling the games, they've been selling a lot more. It's easier to get space where people actually see that your game is being offered when you're not a tiny company. And so it's a huge difference having Amazon sell them and having myself sell them. And so, I mean, there's no reason not to be selling on Amazon at this point, but I find that it was really difficult to push my way through and have people see my games, and that's that. Molly, side note, Hit Point Sales and Ship Naked and their sister shipping company were recently bought out by Funagain Logistics, although retailers are still calling it Hit Point for any trying to find them. Thank you, Molly. That is true, and I did hear that news, which is really wonderful news. Fun Again is also really awesome. They've had some of my games, and they've been selling them, and they're just really nice people, and I really, really like working with them. They do great fulfillment as well. Their prices are fantastic. So if you wanted to be sending your games to the west coast of North America, for example, which is where they're located, it's a really great option. Again, they're just really nice people, and I liked working with them. So that's a good option. Pam asks me to tell you about the process of designing and manufacturing the 3D grid for Fossilis. So we knew we were making a 3D board. You know, that was part of this whole thing, and we had thought about what we wanted it to look like, and we also knew exactly who we wanted to do the design for us. We've worked on several games with Noah Edelman from Game Trays, and he's just a wizard. Like, he is just a wizard. So we knew that we had to contact him to get this done. And Josh gave him his art direction, and 2 days later, Noah came up with like this really, really beautiful and incredibly functional tray that actually comes with a lid where you shake up the bones in it so that you don't end up seeing what bones are sitting inside the board. The process was really easy for design, but one of the things we had to consider is what material it's going to be made of. And so most game trays are made vacuform, where they basically vacuum down the plastic on top of a mold. And that can only be done with a certain weight of plastic. Once it gets too heavy, the mold doesn't form properly. So we're in the midst of trying out two different things. We're going to try to see what it's like to get the heaviest weight vacuum form, and then also try to create a massive mold and make a thin board with that so it's not too heavy. So there's a lot of stuff to think about, from beginning with functionality to end with actually what material is it going to be made out of so that it's going to last forever. Barbara Allen says, I can't wait for it to fulfill. Thank you so much. I'm so excited about it too. It's just, I mean, everything just came together so nicely, and I think it's going to hit really well. Molly says, I'm looking into a new form of minimum price agreement from Amazon alongside a Kansas retailer who wants to work with us to improve his and our online sales. In your experience, can MAAPs actually be enforced somehow? I mean, I'm not really sure what, I don't know. I don't know. Can it be enforced? Yeah, I think that a lot of bigger companies are trying to enforce making sure that your games are being sold by you and not by people who are copying them. Can they be enforced? Well, Amazon is cracking down on barcodes. I'm trying to get all this organized in my head. They're cracking down on board games specifically and barcodes. You now have to prove that the barcode you're using on your game was purchased by you and purchased from a company that is reputable. So every time I make a game now, I have to show Amazon that I have a certificate for it. It's still all out there. Having games that are not that are counterfeit are going to happen. I don't know if they're necessarily going to counterfeit my games, but now one of the things I noticed today on online, somebody posted that there is an Etsy store that is printing other people's game pieces and selling them in their Etsy store. So there's a lot of not great stuff happening online, but you just have to be really careful of it. I don't know. It's a tough call. I mean, there's stuff counterfeit all over the place. Nicole asks, what are the top 1 to 3 events or conferences you recommend a new publisher attend in the year? Our first convention, and actually, believe it or not, my first convention ever was having a booth at Gen Con. I had never been to a convention before. And Gen Con sees the likes of 60,000 different people in one weekend. So that was really, really intense. But I have to tell you, the best advice that anyone ever gave me actually about that happened to come from Eric Lang, who is with Simon. And, you know, I was asking his advice on that same thing. And the thing he said to me was, have a bigger presence at a smaller convention than get lost as a smaller publisher at a massive convention. And I can totally tell you that my last few years of experience are just that. I'm still, you know, people know who we are at Gen Con, and they come to see us specifically because they know we're there, but we're just sort of in a sea of everyone else. And yeah, I think people who stumble by our booth will stop when they see the brightly illustrated games, and they're out on the table. Not every booth has games that are out for people to touch and feel and play a little bit. So they'll stop by, but when you go to a smaller convention and you have a bigger booth, people see you more. You end up being more in people's faces, and I think that was some really really good advice from somebody who's been to many conventions, and that's the thing we're trying to do now. We're trying to have bigger booths, have more games that are being demoed at the convention, and since we started doing that, we actually have seen a growth in sales, and the people who have signed up for our newsletter keeps growing and growing and growing, and I just believe that that was really, really good advice. So you might want to look into, your small local conventions. Origin is a fantastic convention to go to. It's small and it's low key, but it's still not so small. You can get a table there and just do demos all day long. That's a great convention to go to. We're going to PAX for the second year in a row, PAX Unplugged in December, and we're excited about that. It's also a pretty low-key convention, but that gives us more time to talk to people, more time to demo games to people, and this year we're going to have, from my perspective, a pretty huge booth where we're going to have our games being demoed there instead of having our games demoed in the games room, which gives us more exposure. So local conventions are really good. PAX is great. Origins is great. There's a local one here in Toronto that they think that they're probably going to have about 2,000 to 3,000 people this year, which has been growing really nicely. I'm excited to be at that. Find conventions in your area that have a lot of people coming to it. And I think 2,000 to 3,000 is a good number if it's local to you. And I think that's the way to go when you're starting off. Pam asks how I balance being a publisher and a designer, and do I set specific design time and publisher time? It's really difficult for me to get my design head out of everything, and so I think that is what makes me really good at developing games. And to be honest with you, I've spent a lot more time developing games these days than actually designing them, because I love the process of not thinking about how to create a problem, but actually solving the problem. And I say that in a very nice way. I think game designers are amazing. I don't necessarily call myself a game designer just because I have spent so much more time doing all of the other stuff. But it's really difficult for me to take that design piece out of the publishing. And so I feel like I have a little bit more advantage than a publisher who just does the publishing, because I'm always thinking about the design of it and making it better, and not just what it's going to look like on the table and how many units I can sell, and making sure I get my games sent to North America by a certain date. So, I've got a lot more going on in my head than just actually the publisher stuff. Nicole asks what advice I have for a new publisher who's trying to woo designers. I think the best way to do that is to have a plan. It's really important, I think, to know as a publisher what you want your end goal to be, where you want to see the game, and then to move backward from there. And so I know a lot of my teacher friends will recognize this, but I do a lot of backward mapping. So, you know, I want to have a successful Kickstarter campaign where I have 4,000 backers. I take that and I say, okay, well, what is going to get me there? Well, I have to have people sign up for my mailing list, and I need, you know, all of these things to be in place so that that eventually will happen. I think as a publisher, if you're trying to get a designer, you have to be able to show your designers or people you're trying to get games from that you have a plan, and you know how you're going to execute that plan to get their game onto shelves in stores, because basically that's what you're trying to do for them. You're not just in it for making money for yourself. You want to see them be successful as well, and you know, having a solid plan of you know, where you're going to take the game, if you're going to do Kickstarter, if you're going to go straight to retail, you know, you know artists, you know graphic designers, you have a manufacturer lined up, and then what you're going to do after the game is made and who you're going to sell it to, basically. That's a really good way to do it. The other is just, you know, when you do contact a designer and say, hey, do you have anything for me? Just be like, hey, I'm just starting out. I love your games. Do you have anything that might fit what my idea of what I'm doing with my company is? And you tell them what it is that you're trying to do, and what your plan is and how you might execute it. And I think that's the best way. Yeah, that's it. Hi, Kathleen. Nice to see you. Glad you're here. Molly Zeff, views source data at the link below gives 2019 dates, but that's just because it's not updated for 2020. Nicole, do you believe Kickstarter is the best way to fund new games for small publishers? Why or why not? Sorry, I'm just sweating here. I need to take off my scarf. I believe that Kickstarter is a really great way to market your company and your game. But if it's not executed properly, you might end up not being successful. And what I mean by executed properly is when you choose a game to publish, you need to think about whether it is a good game for Kickstarter. And so I'll give you an example. There have been lots of dinosaur games in the last while that were on Kickstarter. One that happened to be at the same time as Fossilis, when we had Fossilis up. And that was Gamelin, and they did very, very well with their game. It was a completely different game than what we were selling to people. But they also have hundreds of thousands of people who back their games anyways because they love Gamelin. And that's fantastic. But they have a certain audience for their games that they've had for the past 6 or 7 years, I believe, and they know what their Kickstarter backers are looking for, and so they make those kind of games. We have learned over the last several years of being on Kickstarter that you have to have a game that stands out and looks different than what everyone else is doing, because there are so many other games. And like that example of dinosaur game is a really good one because there have been so many dinosaur games. We just happen to have a game that is a fantastic game, but also has a really good table presence and presented incredibly well on Kickstarter. So if you want to go to the Kickstarter page and take a look at what I mean, you'll see our campaign looks a lot different than other people's dinosaur games because it is 3D because it has blingy stuff. But you can't have a game that looks nice that also isn't a good game, and gamers can see through that as well. And so they could see that we didn't just have a game that looked amazing and will look amazing on their table. We have a game that is good. Presence, it might not be the place for you. Now, to make a game like Fossilis, we needed a lot of money to be able to make a minimum amount, and to do that, Kickstarter helped us. Some games don't take a lot of money to make. Maybe you only want to make 100 units of your game to give to your friends and maybe sell a few more. Another place that you might be able to do that is game crafters. They not only will make prototypes for you, but they'll also sell your games online as a small publisher. So that's a really good option for people who just, they're doing it for fun, or they're just starting out, and you want to make a small amount of games and you don't want to pay for so many of them. Like our print runs are now between like 5,000 and 8,000 for our first print run. When we made Foodfighters, we made 3,000. We probably should have only made 1,000 at that point. We did end up selling all of them, but it took some time. It might have been better for us to just go to game crafters at that point, and do 1,000 games instead and sell them through game crafters. So there are a lot of options for small publishers, and it doesn't necessarily need to be Kickstarter. I hope that helped you, Nicole. Kathleen, chefs often have new cooks make an omelet to show their skills. Is there a comparable challenge you would ask of a designer? Oh, that's a really good one, Kathleen. Thanks. Wow, what a good question. I want to see, when I'm playtesting a game, I want to see how other people are reacting to it. And I never want to play a game with a designer by myself, or even with anybody who I'm working with. I want to see other people playing it. And so it's nice to go to conventions like Proto-TO, as I was talking about before. It's nice to go to something like that because you can watch other people playing the game. And I want to see how they're reacting to it. I want to see, are they standing up because they're excited about it? I want to see what their faces look like when they, just did that really awesome move that changed their entire game. I think that it's really important to see how people experience it. So I guess you could say that that's like a chef giving an omelet to a new cook to make. That was a very good question, Kathleen. Thank you. Hi, Monica. She says, thank you, great advice on the backward mapping, work from the end goal with a plan. Thank you. Molly, have you ever looked into the extensively number of incubators and accelerators in North America for advice and faster growth? If so, how would you suggest deciding among the few that actually focus on CPGs, consumer packaged goods? No, I haven't. I'll be honest with you. I just don't, like, we're in a hobby market, and we've got a certain number of people who are willing to buy our games, and breaking into another realm is very, very difficult for us to do. And trust me, as a family game designer and publisher, it's a very, very difficult thing to do. The thing that I find is that most companies that are outside the industry don't actually understand what we're doing. And I think that it's very difficult for them to, unless they're gamers, unless they understand and have been immersed in the market, understand how to move our games to a different space. You know, I'll even give you an example of something that happened with me with distribution. There is basically a hobby games market, or a hobby market for toys. And there is a convention, and for the life of me, I can't remember the name of that either right now. Maybe one of you knows what it's called. But there is a convention where stores go and they meet with designers and publishers and distributors, and they buy hobby market toys. For lack of better words, I don't even know what to call it. So PSI, the distributor that I'm working with, is attended this past year, and I'm not sure that any of the games they brought went over that well, because I don't believe that the rest of the world is ready to deal with our kind of games. Anyway, so all I'm basically saying is faster growth would be amazing, but the general public doesn't understand how to play a hobby game. That's my best way of saying it. And because they don't understand how to play a hobby game, they have a hard time bringing hobby games to the general public. And that's why I don't go to companies that try to advance our growth. Also a very good question, thank you. Yes, that was not hair. I don't have that much hair, Pam. That was my scarf. Monica says, what is the value of having independent reviews and media group game reviews? How do I approach talking to them? Just contact them, email them. They're amazing. I typically, if a reviewer has fewer than 1,000 views on a review, if it's a video, I'm sorry, I'm losing my words here. If it's a video, I ask them to pay half the price of the game, and then I'll send it to them, because it really isn't worth like the 1 or 2 people who see it that might buy the game. So I'm happy to give them a discount, but any media, written or podcast or video, it's good for you. And I think that it's really important to get your games out there so people can see what you're doing. And reviewers and previewers, they like to talk about the things that they like. And so if they really like your game, they're not just going to do their review, they're going to tweet about it, and they're going to talk to their friends about it. And so it's really important that your games go out there. Now, how do you approach them? You just email them. Or you message them on Facebook, or however it is they like to get their messages. My headphones are about to die, so I am going to have to switch over here. So if you just bear with me for 1 second, I'm just going to take them out, and I'm going to use my MacBook. Just hang on 1 second. I'm sorry.